Hello and welcome to this Argus Metal Movers interview. I'm Kavanagh, your host, and I'm joined by Mohammed Yagoub, who is a trader and analyst with many years of experience in covering lithium markets and other battery markets as well. So welcome, Mohammed. Thanks for coming all the way from France.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. Thank you for the invitation, Argus, to assist with this presentation and to give my idea about the market. I appreciate. Yes.
We've appreciated sort of talking to you over the years, you know, with on pricing and other things, and yeah, it's good to have you here. So I think I'll ask a pretty broad question first of all. I mean, how do you see? We've had an interesting year last year with lithium prices at record highs. How do you see the lithium market developing over the course of this year?
I think, Thomas, we are having discussions since almost a few months and telling you that I'm really bullish regarding the market for the lithium, especially the hydroxide, the carbonate. Slightly in Europe, seeing the market moving around 85,000. And regarding the hydroxide and the spodumene, also moving in this direction, mostly around 4,500. Logistics is playing a very important role there. In the second hand, I would like to say there is an arbitrary situation between Asia and Europe. We are seeing definitively a pricing lower in Asia with the low demand in China. However, Japan and South Korea are driving the markets. So I believe we will still have an increasing price in Chinese reference. Regarding Europe, the price will continue to increase as mostly many projects from Latin America and Africa, also recycling in UK. We are talking a lot about there, but the production will not be there in the next following years. We need more time in that sense.
So between China and Europe and Japan, there's now some separation because the Chinese prices obviously come off this year.
Definitively. There is a weak demand. There is also, we have to look on the project coming up in China for them internal consumption. But I would say China can sell a lower price now than the domestic market to Japan and South Korea. And I'm looking forward to see at somehow how the prices are moving. But I believe it will be slightly higher, but Europe will be and US will be definitively higher.
You mentioned that there's some new projects coming about in Africa. I mean, how important do you think Africa will be to the global lithium landscape in the coming years?
Well, I spent almost all the years traveling in Africa between Congo, Nigeria, Togo, and different area. First of all, Africa have the biggest reserve in the world, I will say. You have 400 million tons of pegmatite sitting in Congo, mostly between Senegal and Senegal. I have around something between 3 million, 5 million with Mali. You have Nigeria, but you have really different state. We're talking about also potential of few million tons. And also a lot of countries like North Africa, which we are not talking a lot, like Algeria, has some rare earth in some places and titanium. So for sure, there is also potential of lithium. I think Africa will play a very important role in the next following. Let's not talk about the end of the decade, but the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, as all these countries mostly are 3, 4, 5, 6 times the size of European countries. So I will say if Africa organize, the government and privates are organizing very well, moving in the mining in a very clean way, not like the other commodities, like what's happening in cobalt, and with a better process capacities, I would say Africa today will probably be able to supply the whole Europe and the whole US However, it has to be done properly, and there is still a lot of facilities to build around in order to have such impact.
Can I just ask a quick question, maybe for some of our listeners or viewers that might not be aware of the pegmatite resources? What's the kind of difference between pegmatite and the sort of classic lithium resources that you have in say, South America?
Well, I'm not a miner, but to give you an idea, let's say the brines is mostly, it's more competitive in terms of pricing. If you should process it later on. However, it's requiring a better technology in order not to create, let's say, a disaster in that sense. The pegmatite, let's say, we have, it needs less, let's say, efficient technology. It's more in abundance, but however, you need more capacity of processing behind in order to purify it, and there is a really different stage than the brines one, let's say. And of course, the difficulties, let's say, of the pegmatite is, let's say, if we speak about Nigeria, in 5 states, you have really different qualities. Spodumene moving from 2% to sometimes 9%, 11%. And of course, all these different results makes not easy to move forward, let's say, with some project. Yeah.
And I know we've mentioned these resources in Africa. We've mentioned sort of an arbitrage between maybe China and other countries in Asia and Europe. I mean, are there any other untapped opportunities in lithium or any other battery metal, for that instance, that you view as sort of underserved in the market at the moment?
Well, if we move forward with the real opportunities, let's say if we talk about the paper market in lithium, today we start to have some volatility, some bulling and some contract, which is also good news. Traders like us are really impacting this. However, it still needs more time to bring volatility and to increase. Why? Because we are looking too much on the mining aspect and not enough on the recycling. We need a different way to produce now lithium. And from the paper side, I would say there's a lot of opportunity coming. We hope that in the next 1, 2, 3 years to have more transparency on the pricing, and also contract few years ago were on the fixed contract. All the OMS wanted a fixed contract. I think we were there during the dinner. But today we found out that it's impossible outside of fixing a price during 3 months. It's not possible to have let's say, a long fixed contract. Therefore, let's say floating pricings are offering a lot of opportunities for traders and the market in general. Yeah.
So the lithium market is kind of where that iron ore market was a few years ago, where you've gone from a few big producers to more smaller producers, and you get a lot more spot trade, a lot more paper trade.
Exactly. Also, I would like to send a message. Today, you don't have enough pension fund. You don't have enough investment fund pumping, let's say, this paper market. And I'm expecting in the next following years having more financial market bringing liquidity, not speculation, but really liquidity for everyone. You know, in order that the producer in Africa and Latin America can have a better idea and can have more money floating on the market also. Yeah.
And I think looking forward, as this market grows, there's obviously plenty of projections out there for how supply and demand are going to be balanced. Do you personally believe that supply of lithium over the next decade is going to be able to keep up with the demand that's coming down the pipe?
I would say it depends how we're gonna use the lithium in the batteries. Today you have a lot of competitor product to the lithium, which we're gonna develop. You have the manganese sulfate, the graphite, cobalt sulfate, nickel sulfate, briquette, bore, different product. The technology is changing a lot over the years in the batteries, producing more efficient. If we keep going with this pricing, it's going to be very difficult for the gigafactory to be really competitive. We can have a look in different cases like British Volt and some others in Europe. So basically, I would say we have to approach the market by a very efficient way. Let's call it. We have to compare also where we're going to apply the using of the lithium. Everyone is looking on OMS, but we know that, for example, in Africa, we need a lot of batteries in some hospitals to make it work because there's a big lack of electricity. And 5 to 10,000 people are dying because of this lack of electricity in these hospitals. So basically, if we apply the lithium market in a different technology, I would say is gonna be the demand would be very, very high. Mm-hmm. So we have to compare also how we're gonna consume it. Electric cars are still expensive, and in that sense, probably some new way of consuming cars are gonna work. For example, few families are gonna share the same electric cars. Mm. And then it's gonna put the price, let's say, of the lithium down than what we can project in the future. Mm. So yeah.
So there might be less use case for everyone to have an electric vehicle. You might have a shared system, but at the same time, that lithium-ion technology is going to be branched out into various different.
Yes, because we are talking about the big volumes, 700 to 800,000 lithium hydroxide and carbonate consumed in Europe, US probably the double, Asia more. So basically, look just how COVID have affected, for example, China's demand. And there's also other factors which can impact. But still, if we apply the lithium to the different technology, the demand will be very strong. But with all the producers and product coming on the market, I would say in the next 10-15 years, we will have a stabilization on the price. It's going to be mostly what's going on mostly on the oil market, maybe. Yeah.
And I think a good follow-on to that is how important could and should recycling be to that larger picture? And could it replace a decent amount of the primary lithium, or will it just be an addition to that?
Yes, good point. I have to say the last years, we are really speaking a lot with client producers, engineers, providers of feed like batteries and black mass. I would say the recycling today is representing only 5-10%, even less, I would say, of the refined product. Mostly all the biggest producers and the new entrant are not ready to supply this amount. There is still some calibration with them labs, and I would say the recycling is going to play a very important role, impact on the market. However, it needs time to develop. For example, if we base this refined product on the black mass and the batteries, you need to be sure that the legislation is good in terms of export. Are you going to export from these countries, Africa, or wherever, as a waste or as a product? Secondly, you still need to have a good calibration in terms of parameters. If you have more aluminum in some black mass, it means you have less product in cobalt. So all has to be organized in a good way. And it's requiring a lot of feed and aggregations. Let's say humanity is sitting on 50, 60 million tons of product. I mean, our society is selling us different product which the lifetime is 5 years to 7 years.
Talking electronics.
Electronics, it means mobile phones, screen TVs, and all these products are containing rare earths, are containing different materials.
So not even factoring in the EVs yet.
Yeah.
So we've still got.
Yeah, the traditional way. And with the right technology, we can, you can still produce some very interesting product, useful for OMS and helping the energy transition. I think Japan is really advanced in that sense, but still it's today expensive to recycle this, so it has to move with more organization, warehousing, and aggregations, and a better technology. So I believe recycling is gonna change the market, and probably will give, let's say, faster, more product than traditional mining. Yeah.
So at the moment, with this sort of electronic waste and things like that, the main products coming out of that would be, the main value add would be cobalt and maybe the lithium as well, right?
In terms of different product, let's say, yeah, we are, I mean, I'm not an expert in cobalt sulfate. Of course, it's a market which we're following, but I will definitively, if I'm a recycler, I will definitively look on product like manganese sulfate, which following copper project, and I believe manganese in general is quite cheap. I mean, you have Brazil, you have few countries which are able to provide this feed. Prices went really down. But if you work on it, on recycling, manganese sulfate and graphite offer for me the best possibilities for anodes, especially the graphite, because if you go to the mine, it takes a lot of time to produce. There is still some issues on the water, lack of electricities, especially mining in Africa. Latin America still, it's quite a lot of time, investigation. So, and we're talking about a market of a few million tons, where you don't have really a paper market, non-transparent market. So definitively the graphite issued from the recycling offer better possibilities, and the manganese sulfate cheaper, more volumes, but it has to be tested every time. So basically, let's call it, yeah, these two products are going to play a very important role, and also the lithium carbonate, I believe, and the lithium hydroxide with the same technology from the recycling, I believe the price differences will be also the same, not a gap of 5,000 or 15,000 like we are observing today in the international market.
Just a final question on recycling. I mean, how do you envision this recycling market evolving? Are we going to have a similar situation that we've seen in other recycling markets, where you have the higher technology, sort of more developed Western countries exporting their waste to places like Africa and Asia? Or are we going to see more localized recycling with hubs in different regions, depending on?
Good question. I think if we look the next 10 years, it's going to be probably first some export of raw materials from different South Asian countries or Asian countries, or batteries, black mass, processors, to Western countries, US, Europe. That will be the first, let's say, the first cycles, to enable to the local produce to make money. I would say it. Of course, with the right legislation and the right export, But to move forward in the second cycles, I think the future belongs to the people who are doing everything locally. For example, in Africa, producing mostly the black mass and then having a recycling plant, and then moving to the production of the batteries, certain level, in order to produce these batteries to Europe. So I think all this, whether Africa or South Asia or some countries who are in need of cash in order to increase the balance sheet in the international market, government will look to, let's say, export products with more value, not only the raw materials. And I think I would like to pass a message in that way. We are really working closely with countries like Congo in order to process, for example, the lithium on the sulfate stage and then to process it in Europe. But the futures belongs to these countries, It depends how it's going to be organized, but I would say definitively all these countries, whatever Latin America or Africa, will play very, very key roles to support Europe in energy transition and in US.
And just a last one, are there any other critical materials that you think are being overlooked by EV makers, lithium-ion battery producers?
Well, I would say probably the boron. You have several mines in the world. There is a big, some potential technology which can make, let's say, pricing even more competitive for the batteries. I would say, some boron and some other rare earth. When they're combined together, they can give better possibilities for the industrials outside of the lithium, nickel sulfate, cobalt sulfate, where of course pricing will be still higher. Yes, probably this material. So Mongolia are interesting. Countries like Mongolia and Kazakhstan would be, but again, it depends on the geopolitics. If it's gonna be more, let's say, asked from Chinese or from Russian. Also, something we have to consider: there's a lot of lithium in Ukraine, and I will think that this war depend how this war will finish, and depend how Ukraine will move forward. But there is several big deposits also in Ukraine, and all this can play also very important impact. Yeah.
Final thing, I think we touched on this a little bit earlier. I mean, how can these projects, as they develop, make sure that they're developing in a sustainable way, especially in Africa, where ESG hasn't necessarily been the easiest thing to achieve?
Well, I think we have spoken that. I had several discussions with different converters, OMS, since a couple months. First of all, ESG has to start with someone. We can't give the responsibility to only the state. In Africa, I think the state in Africa will be able to do everything possible to produce a clean lithium, wherever Africa or Latin America, but it has to be a cooperation. It has to start with let's say if you build up a processing plant or move to the mine, workers need to have, for example, social benefit pensions, and unfortunately in other commodities production like cobalt, this is not the case. So when I speak with the Minister of Energy in Congo or Nigeria, educations and really providing social benefit to workers is something also, it's the base. So ESG has to start with that, you know, women empowerment also around. So it's a collaboration between really a private and government. However, as I was telling you, we need to start to have a more materials processed in the countries in order to bring all the value to the to countries like Africa, like Congo, for example, or Rwanda. Otherwise, we will not be able to provide, let's say, an ESG way of working. So in that sense, I think it has to start with the cooperation and how all the value chain has to be produced in a place. Yeah.
Perfect. I think that's all we've got time for today. So thanks a lot for coming in all the way from France to talk to me.
From France and Switzerland.
And yeah, thank you for listening to this edition of Argus Metal Movers and watching us. And please visit www.argusmedia.com for anything further.
Thank you, Thomas, for this invitation. I appreciate it to Argus, and it was a pleasure to communicate this.